Good evening and salutations, my GH fans. Okay, so let's start off with this confession, right? This is where Charlotte and Danny, they want to sit there and help their brother out. So they go to the PCP, or whatever, and, they confess to Nathan. And at first I was like, why is Nathan not sitting there saying you shouldn't be doing this because, you need an adult here. Do you want a lawyer? Do you think it's a good idea? Anything like that, right? He's just like, okay, fine, lay it on me. I was wondering about that. So they pretty much confessed to their part um, in the whole break-in, and they're like, we didn't break anything. He didn't break anything, or whatever. He made a distraction, and we got out of there. Okay, so they're done with the confession. Nathan calls Jason and gets Lulu and Dante down to see the kids. And I'm gonna get to all three of them in a second. When they get in the room, Nathan's like, listen, I haven't actually done this in a while, and I really messed up on the whole procedure of everything. Just remember that word procedure because it's very important. I'm gonna sit there and tell you why later on. So he's like, listen, I can't sit there and take this evidence. And Lulu's like, listen, that's a good thing because at this point, none of them, Lulu, Dante, and Jason, when he gets down there, don't want them to confess. But then later on, when Alexis gets down there with Rick, Jason's like, are you sure you want to do this? And so I was like, it goes from them not confessing to them essentially, going to give their statement. Provided, Alexis like, hey, listen, just in the future, you don't talk to any cops that are lawyer, preferably me or Diane. So, Alexis explains to Charlotte and Danny how, them coming forward can sit there and help Dawn. Just like Rick isn't there telling Dante and Lulu about how, them coming forward, the kids coming forward, can really help um, Rocco in his case and put Dalton in a hot seat as somebody who lied and committed fraud and stuff like that. Now, before that happens, Dante and Lulu are talking, and Dante, he's still angry as hell at Gio, up until the point where he was there starting to kick himself for kind of backpedaling the first time with the whole drunken incident thing. And basically Smith is saying that if I would have went more harder and I wouldn't have been so easy on him, um, I could have pushed him further enough apart to the point where Gio didn't ruin Rocco's life. Now Lulu surprised the hell out of me. Okay, because Lulu's like, let's just be honest. Rocco is just as responsible. Rocco knew what he was doing. Yeah, she's upset with Gio for roping him into it, but Rocco has a mind of his own. He has to sit there and take responsibility in this whole thing. And she talks about a pattern with Rocco. All the way back to when he was in contact with Charlotte when Charlotte was on the run with Valentine. All the way up into the point where he's lying by admission, hanging out with Britt and Liesel and stuff like that. So it's like, we got to sit there and, we can't put this all on Gio and we can't put this all on Emma. And I'm like, good, at least somebody snipped there and holding Rocco accountable. Just like before, like, nobody told him to sit there and drink. Hell, Danny was like, yo, just hold the goddamn cup. He didn't sit there and say, oh, just take a couple of sips or whatever. All he said was hold the cup. Anything that the Rocco did, that's on him, right? Now, again, before Jason got called down to the station, Rick called him down. Now, oddly enough, Britt has a convers Britt's conversation with Jason is very similar to the conversation that Rick had with um, Alexis. See, they're both saying that they're trying to get the kids to come forward. Britt's saying that they're trying to get Danny to come forward. And also Rick is saying that they're trying to get Danny to come forward. And honestly, to tell you the truth, these conversations are damn near pointless because they're already at the police station saying that they're confessing. So it's almost kind of a moot point with both of them to some extent because Rick wanted to sit there and get Danny to come forward, and in exchange, he would sit there and point. He would sit there and give Alexis to point to another alibi. And this long story short, he points towards, again towards Portia, and talks about the evidence and her tampering with Heather's medical records to sit there and keep her in jail longer, and how Drew probably found out about the tampering and was blackmailing Portia, which would explain the strain um with Curtis and Drew, and how Portia could be a potential shooter. Now again, when Rick was sitting there saying, "Hey, listen, I gave you a good enough lead or whatever that could sit there and possibly get your client off," Alexa's like, it's kind of a moot point because I got to get Jason to sit there and agree to it, and Luda to agree to it. Otherwise, it's just kind of pointless. So it's like the only thing that you wound up doing, Rick, was really helping her. And there was no guarantee that she was even going to be able to help you. Again, moot point because they already confessed. Now, Rick calls Jason, and Britt's like, I need Danny to come forward to prove that, Rocco was just in there breaking stuff and tampering stuff and all sorts of expensive chemicals and stuff like that was not in the room at that time. Jason's like, listen, I'll do almost anything for you, but I'm not going to do that for you. And Britt's first, her first reaction is, well, if Carly asked you to do it, then you would do it. And then she kind of realized what she said and kind of backtracked at that point. And I'm kind of just like, listen, Jason, ever since that Britt got back, all she's done is be a royal pain in the ass to you. That's pretty much essentially what she's done so far. Listen, I get it. Okay? Maybe Jason just likes him feisty. I get it. I've been there. But I have my limits. Okay? I have my limits. I'm like, Jason, at this point, you should just sit there and tell us chicks to sit there and lose your number. Just tell her to kick rocks because, her giving the attitude with you was just like, no. And then and she really thought about it, like, you knew the answer was going to be no. Once again, it was just pointless, but whatever. Now, Britt goes to Sitwell. Sitwell's having a conversation with Marco, and basically it's like, I want to get Dalton off this project and just get Britt on it full time, hands on, because he's a loose cannon. And Marcos is like, I think that's a bad idea because, the dude is already unhinged. He's already being a Karen. He's just going to be a lot worse if we sit there and kick him off his own project. But Sitwell's not just thinking about kicking him off the project. He's thinking about kicking his entire spirit off of this goddamn planet. So they talk a little bit, then Britt comes in. And Britt's like, you need to sit there and put a leash on Dalton and get him to retract this statement today. Because although Rocco is not my son by whatever, he means a lot to me, and I will burn this shit to the ground. So put a leash on him. Do what you got to do. Now, it made me sit there and think about a theory. I don't do too much theories. I usually don't. But, you know, Sitwell could essentially kill two birds with one stone. Dalton is, let's be honest, he's not meant for this world any longer, right? Sitwell could sit there and kill Dalton. It's a frame Lord to do it. See, Laura, on top of assaulting him, did sit there and threaten that man's life. What better way to sit there and shut up Dalton and frame Laura for the crime? She's not in the race. Measure C is passed. And Sonny, got to kick rocks with his peers. At first, I was sitting there thinking, blame it on Sonny, but, I don't, I mean, he could do that, but it's better to sit there and get Laura out the way because Laura's still going to be a problem even if you get Sonny out the way. Or he could just sit there and get Sonny out the way and he could just take the peers, whatever. But the point is, he could just do that and, have it be one of those two problems. Now I'm sitting there thinking Laura because I just think that storyline wise it'll be a little bit more better than just taking out Sonny. I mean, come on. That goes on. What else was up happening? Oh, okay. So Laura's worried about how her actions can cost her the race and how people are going to be looking at her, all sorts of stuff that they may be thinking and saying. So he's like, listen, I read the comments. Girl, you came across as a total badass. You came across as relatable. Because let's be 100% honest. Any grandmother who is sitting there watching their grandson be bullied by an entitled prick like him would have did the exact same thing, if not worse. Okay? At that point, she was not the mayor. She was a grandmother. Right? So, and Sonny was also like, sometimes you just gotta sit there and trust the people with the votes and stuff like that. Now they get to a point when they talk about Rocco. They talk about Rocco, they talk about Justine, and Sonny, because he has an inside man in the PCPD, basically sat there and said that the cops still didn't go through the evidence. Now, Sonny learned through Justine, maybe a private conversation, I don't know, is that the reason why Justine took the evidence right then and there was because she was like, if they took the time to have the cops, go through the proper procedure, okay, this is why the word procedure is important, is that optic wise, it was going to look bad. You have the dad, that's the commissioner. You have the grandmother, that's the mayor. And she felt like if they would have took their time and she would have stalled, that it would have made the police department look bad. So let me get this straight. Because you didn't want to look bad. You decided to said, after this thing called procedure, we're just going to sit there and take photographic evidence, and then we'll lock them up and we'll just sort out the mess. We'll just sort it out later on. What? The fact that it was not sorted out that night is insane. I thought about that the entire bus ride home. I was like, wait, and this is while I was watching the show called Hollywood. So I was like, wait, hold on. So you tell me that this man is spending a couple of nights in a detention center and they didn't even get around to looking at this so-called evidence? But you are attacking on federal charges that is going to follow him for the rest of his life, and you didn't even bother to do your due diligence because you didn't want to make the office look bad? I've been watching this show since high school. I know when it comes towards the law, okay, shit can be kind of fickle, but goddamn, like this is a teenager that you locked up, threw him in a detention center, and said, "Oh, you mean that evidence? That stuff that you allegedly did? Oh, we're gonna get to it. Yeah, we have a lot of stuff to do, and I did take the day off. Like what? You understand how pissed off I would be if I got, charged for a crime and they just got around to the evidence whenever the hell they felt like it? That is nuts. So anyway, yeah, that's pretty much where they are. Now, Carly is still, Carly is a master manipulator. Okay? I mean, hell, she's been a master manipulator since the 90s, since she's gotten to Port Charles. She has perfected this craft, right? So she um, Jack, comes to Jack, and, apparently Jack is like, we haven't saw each other in a while, you haven't seen me in a while, what's going on? And Carly was like, listen, I was hurt, you lied to me, so my knee jerk reaction was to pull away. So apparently they didn't see each other in a while. And she came over there with a bottle of wine. See, I feel like the idea was to make him sweat, come back and be like, okay, cool, we can sit there and work this out. Snare him into whatever this trap is that you're gonna do. Um, and it works. It works. And there's a part, where they start kissing, and then Jack gets a call. Carly has this look of disgust. I felt like Carly could not wait to get this man off of her as fast as possible. Ever saw clippings of a movie called The Toxic Avenger with Peter Dinklage? You would swear it would be like that thing was on Carly because she could not wait to get him off of her. She almost looks like she starts crying and everything. Um, and then, after that, it kind of just ends and she goes out the door. She has that look. I still have no idea what Carly's end game is. She's on this revenge scheme, and at this point, y'all know how I think about that. Yeah, seriously, y'all know how I sit there and think about that. But it is what it is. Um, yeah, I did this twice. So I could have swore. I don't know if I talked about the fact that Jason, when Britt got there, when Jason got there, Britt was asking him to um to try to get Danny to confess, and Jason said no. Okay, yeah, I did. I think I did. I think I did. I had a phone call earlier, so I had to sit there and do this whole thing again. So I was like, I don't know if I actually covered that, but I felt like I did. Anyway, I felt like that is generally the gist of the episode. Now, if I missed anything, let me know in the comments section. I will be doing a live stream tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. We'll sit there and talk about all the shows, as you know. Um, and if you're not a member, make sure you join by clicking in the description box below. We had a really good time this weekend, um, looking at some classic characters, and my goodness, soaps. I hate to sit there and say soaps were better back then, but like they were definitely different. Like there was things that was said back then that you could not say now. You cannot say now without Twitter losing their goddamn minds and people just, going ape shit. And there was a certain magic behind watching some of the old shows, which is something that I do every weekend. We visit classic characters and their journeys and stuff like that. And it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. It's weird. It's like going through the classics. It's like really like learned a lot from how they operated back then, how some of these actors that are on the show now, and it's just it's just crazy, you know. Um, Especially when they recast. They recast. I mean, it's sometimes. like night and day. And I mean, like almost like rewriting a whole character just to fit for that particular actor or actress. Anyway, with that being said, I'm gonna go and I will see y'all in the next video.